Hello, fellow travelers. Welcome to episode 7 of the RV Canucks Podcast, your essential pre-trip RV checklist. We are the RV Canucks, of course. I am Melina, and I am joined by my handsome husband, Dan.
Hello.
You know, as RVers, we love to say that the beauty of owning a travel trailer is that all we need to do is pack our clothes, food, and go. While it's awesome to have a cottage on wheels where we just need to pack minimal things, we also know it's not as simple as just pulling out of the driveway. So whether you're new to RVing or have been traveling for years, ensuring each trip is safe and enjoyable should be top of mind. In this episode, we're going to talk about all the must-dos before you hitch up and hit the road, what to think about before you even start packing, and as a bonus, we'll be sharing with you our picks for the top 10 RV essentials that we couldn't live without. So we figured this was a great follow-up to episode 6, where we reviewed what you needed to know about the essential operating systems in your RV. Of course, there's always more that can be done. So if you listen to this episode, drop us a line by email at hello@rvcanucks.com, leave us a message on the show notes in our blog, or reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram at RV Canucks. Tell us your must-do items that we didn't cover, and we'll share them on a future episode. So Dan, why isn't it just as simple as pulling out of the driveway when you're ready to hit the road?
Well, I think because you want to do this safely. I think if you rush getting ready and you just throw the trailer on the tongue of the hitch and you get going, that probably there's a good chance something might go wrong. So a little bit of time and a good routine helps everybody get down the road safely with minimal delays to the rest of your trip. So I think probably what you want to make sure is that you give good thought to what kind of camping you're doing. Are you going to be off the grid? Are you going to be boondocking? Are you camping in somebody's field at their farm? So know what you can and can't use on the trailer. If you're off grid or you're boondocking, that means your 120 volts won't work, which means you can't run your toaster, your coffee maker.
Charge your phone.
So maybe give that a little bit of thought. Does that mean you need to bring some portable charging blocks for your phone? Does it mean that you need to bring a generator or an inverter for your trailer to run off that? If you're going to camp maybe in somebody's driveway or at their farm, maybe you need to bring an adapter to convert your 30 amp or your 50 amp into a 120 outlet in their garage or the side of their house. So you want to make sure that you have all those things. Inevitably, in our experience, you usually find out you don't have something that you really need at 10 o'clock at night.
What about the fridge? There's a lot of talk in the RV community about, why isn't my fridge cold? We're ready to go camping and my fridge is still warm.
Yeah, so your fridge needs time to cool down. So what we do is we will typically bring the trailer home the night before if we're going to go out, or maybe even a couple of days before, but definitely the night before. I go out to the trailer and I turn on the fridge and I let it run empty, no food in it, no nothing, and just let it get good and cooled down so that the day of the departure, when we put food in that's already cold, the fridge is already cooled down and it doesn't have to work any harder. So 2 of the things I would say that are particularly important when it comes to an RV fridge is understanding, unless you have a very, very high model fridge in a super bus motorhome, it's not going to have any kind of compressor or fan system in it. It's basically, you're cooling it by gravity, right? There's a coil and it cools down and eventually it'll get to the bottom of the fridge, for lack of all the scientific terms. So a couple of things you can do to make sure your fridge is nice and cool if you're a bit of a food quality worrier like me. I'm not going to lie. But what we did is we went and picked up a little thermometer for the fridge that we just stick on the bottom. It actually is hanging on the bottom rack of the fridge that tells us accurately what the temperature is. What a lot of people do is that they will also pick up a little battery powered fan that they will put in the fridge while it's cooling down, just to circulate air a little bit quicker. I know you tend to light the stove for a minute or two. Yeah, so if you haven't used your trailer for a couple of weeks, your propane lines will be empty. So I turn on the propane, I go into the trailer, I open up the stove and I light the stove. And what that does is it pulls the propane through the system a little bit quicker, which means when I turn the fridge on and I run the fridge on propane, that it will light up right away and I don't kind of have to go back in several times to make sure that it's working. So I prefer to run it on propane the night before, and the easiest way to get the propane through your trailer quickly is to turn on the stove, because that pulls the propane from your tanks into the rest of the lines.
Cool.
Maybe offer one more tip, and this is more to do when you're actually traveling down the road, is when I pull into a parking lot or a rest stop, I try as much as possible to give a little bit of thought to how I position the trailer. And if at all possible, I try to park the trailer in such a way that the sun is not shining on the side of the trailer that has the fridge. Mm-hmm. Or if it's possible and it doesn't impede anybody else's access and I can't park in that way, I'll put the awning out just a little bit to give a little bit of shade. And I find that actually can really help. We traveled through southwestern United States, New Mexico, Arizona, and it was hot. And we really needed to take those things into account on those really hot days when it's over 100 degrees to just make it easier on the fridge and keep everything nice and cold.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I think there were some days on that trip where we actually ended up putting like a bag of ice inside the fridge just to kind of keep it cool if we had a day of traveling, because I think some days when we were traveling it was upwards of like 112 degrees. We were kind of in quite the heat wave. So
yeah, I think that was, really a different experience that we'll probably talk about some other time down the road when we get that far. But if you live in Canada, this was heat like you've never ever seen in your life, and in the desert with warnings at the side of the road recommending that people travel with extra water just in case.
And not to use their air conditioner in their vehicles so they don't overheat. But as me from the West Coast, as West Coasters like to say, but it's a dry heat.
Yep, so that's what I'd say I do for the fridge is I just let it run the night before and get good and cooled down.
Mm-hmm. Now, once you're kind of prepared in the type of traveling you're going to do when you get there and you make sure that you have all the necessary supplies to do that successfully, you have to deal with your basic trailer walk around, your pre-trip checklist before you hit the road. And there's some pretty important items on there. Our list is a list of 18. You could get down into the minutia and have like a list of 50 things, I'm sure. But we've kind of had a really good think about just the very, very important things we need to do to get hitched up in a reasonable amount of time and get to our destination safely. So we start with the hitch, right?
Yep, we start with the hitch, and I think more than one person can help get the vehicle hitched up. Chances are somebody's going to help guide you back in and get your hitch underneath the tongue of the trailer, and probably there'll be 2 people involved. What I would say is the driver, or one person, probably the driver, at least if I'm the driver, should be the person that checks that the entire thing is hitched up. Mm-hmm. If somebody's putting in a pin or a bar or latching something, that's all well and good, but when 2 people are doing it, there's always that chance that somebody thinks that the other person did it. And I've seen a few times where people have not hooked up correctly. And I can tell you from personal experience with a small boat trailer this summer that I let my 12-year-old hitch it up, and we kind of got about 100 feet down the road and I heard a bang and there was no damage and nothing came off, but she had not put everything in. And it was my fault for not going out there and checking.
So I guess with that, once you hook up your trailer and have your 7-pin connection, you want to check all the lights and blinkers and...
Yep, check your lights, and that's a great job for the kids because, hey, they're young and they can run back there and you can run through the lights and make sure that everything works, because I think that's going to really help you get down the road when you need to make a lane change or somebody doesn't know where you're coming. You're probably going to get a lot more goodwill just by using your signals.
Mm-hmm. How about tires?
Tires. So what I would encourage everybody to do is check your tires, make sure that you've got the proper pressure, make sure there's no damage to them. In episode 6, I talked about tires and that they wear a little bit differently. They don't last quite as long. So make sure that there's no damage in them and make sure that you've got proper tire pressure in your tires. And don't be afraid to take your hand and run it on the side of the tire that points into the inside of the trailer or underneath where you can't see as easily, just to feel if there's anything abnormal back there, because that's where I found our first problem with our first set of tires and led me to have to get them changed.
That is a good tip. So the next couple of items are more about just kind of making sure everything has a home, everything's in its place. And one of them is to make sure that the slide is in. We do this all the time because when we pull over and somebody needs to use the trailer toilet, we have to put out the slide. And we usually only end up putting it out about 6 inches because that's all we need to squeeze past there, use the bathroom, and then we're out of there. And constantly we get out and we're back in the truck, we're ready to pull away, and we see that the slide's out of crack. So making sure your slide is in is super important.
I would just like to emphasize we have never pulled away with the slide out or the slide in out, but we have driven through the mountains in Virginia and past motorhomes where the slide out was clearly out of the motorhome. And
like coming further out as they drove, which I don't even want to think about how that would make you fishtail.
Or if it just completely comes out. Listen, we got around that guy as quickly as we could and got down the road.
Yeah. So next on the light is making sure that your windows and your skylights are closed. So actually tonight I was just coming home with our older daughter Fiona, and we passed or almost drove over a skylight sitting in the middle of the highway. So somebody somewhere in southwestern Ontario has lost a skylight off their trailer or their RV. Again, one of these items that's super easy to overlook. Like, your trailer's tall, you often can't see over top of it, but just going through and making sure, because chances are if it rips off, you're not going to notice until it starts raining and then it comes inside your trailer. Windows and skylights for sure. Lights, making sure your lights are off, that your pump and your water heater is off. It's going to drain your battery. The last time we went camping, our 15-year-old again was packing the trailer and she left the lights on all night so that the battery was dead when we went out the next morning to leave. So making sure those types of things are off is super important as well.
Yeah, and especially if you are traveling with a little bit of water and a tap gets bumped and your pump is off, you're not going to shoot water out your tap unexpectedly. And listen, it takes all of 2 seconds to turn that pump on once you show up and start unhitching and get set up.
Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, the truck will offer a little bit of a charge to your trailer battery, but it's certainly not going to charge it right back up if it's deader than a doornail. So,
or if you're just traveling a short distance, a couple hours.
Mm-hmm. So fridge, we already talked about fridge, but making sure it's set to propane and not electric while you're on the road. Now, technically the official manufacturer's advice is don't travel with your fridge on propane. A lot of people do it. But this is our disclaimer. Like, we choose to do it, but we feel comfortable with the setup of our trailer that we travel with the fridge on propane. So maybe check your manufacturer's directions.
Yeah, check your manufacturer's directions and check the local regulations where you are. The thing to know about the propane tank when you are using it, even when you're parked, is you only need to run off one tank. So you don't need to turn both tanks on. You don't need to put the selector in the middle. Run it off one tank. When that tank's done, flip it over to the other tank and then run that tank down. Our own experience, having crossed North America, is I don't even think we went through one tank of propane that entire summer. Granted, we weren't running the furnace, but, traveling in June, July, and August, you're not going to go through a lot of propane.
Mm-hmm. Next would be, the pilot light of the oven. So I talked in episode 6 last week about having the pilot light on because we use the oven, which we normally don't do. But that pilot light will stay on if you don't physically turn it off. Like, it's meant to stay on as a pilot light, and then every time you want to use the oven portion of your range, you can just flip it to the temperature you want, and it automatically turns on. So that's the last thing you want going when you're traveling down the road. So just make sure that is off, even if, I guess, especially if it's not something that you use very often, just to double check that it's not still on while you're barreling down the highway. In the same vein, like, make sure your heater and your air conditioner is off. We just flick it to the off position before we go. We know it's not going to draw on anything while we're on the road.
That part's especially important, that your air conditioner is off, because when you arrive at your final destination and you hook back up to power, you need to hook up to power and properly be plugged in and set up, and then turn the air conditioner on. You don't want to make a false draw or have a surge or have something come through when you're just getting set up. So plug yourself into shore power and then go back and turn on the air conditioner.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Stowing loose items, super important. Something I find new RVers tend to ask a lot of questions about is like, where do I put all like my pretty plants and the things I want out while I'm living in my RV? And the best places for us, we put a lot of stuff on our master bed, a lot of stuff that it doesn't seem to sway a lot. It's at the front of the trailer. You don't get a ton of movement. So we put all kinds of stuff on the master bed, and I don't think we've ever had anything fall off it. So that's a great spot for us. In terms of our shower, we have a shower caddy that hangs in the shower, but if we left everything in there, it would be a disaster, and we'd probably have a broken shower door when we arrived at our destination. So I take everything from the hanging shower caddy and I put it in like a dorm room style shower caddy in the pan of the shower. And the shower floor and your sinks are great places to keep like plants or things that you want to have, those kind of decorative items you want to have in your trailer. Just making sure that they're not going to be up on a high bunk where if they topple off, they'll break, that type of thing. Another great spot for us is because we have a slide, we end up with a very narrow channel kind of between the kitchen cupboards and the slide. So we put a lot of things there that can't tip over, like maybe a laundry basket we'll put with a bunch of items stacked in the middle, which is great. If we're traveling locally, we tend to pack up our food before we leave. We'll hit the grocery store close to our home, and we'll pack up all of our dry goods and our fridge before we leave. And if that's the case, our latches are pretty good. We have a fairly new trailer and our latches are pretty stiff, but over time those do tend to loosen. So if you have anything you're worried about coming out of your latched cupboards, another simple solution like, an elastic band wrapped around. I don't tend to do that on our cupboards right now, except for the cupboard where I keep my wine, because it's very important and it's very high up. So I tend to put an elastic band around that one just to make sure. And I do have an RVing friend who had a terrible incident with olive oil, where a bottle of olive oil fell out and broke and was literally all over her trailer. So just taking an extra minute and just to make sure you're pushing on the cabinets, making sure they're latched, and double latching them with some kind of string or elastic if you need to is a smart idea. Jacks and leveling systems.
Yeah, so the jacks and the leveling systems need to be completely up as far as they'll retract. And it's a great job for the kids to do, but it's the last thing that I check as I do my walk around right before we pull away is that they've brought them all the way up. Now, we've never had a problem because they are all the way up, but what I will tell you is that we can all relate to having driven through a gas station entrance or a driveway entrance where the hitch is bottomed out and hit, and you don't want to have your leveling gear or your stabilizing jacks hit as well. Mm-hmm. So just make sure they're up. It's a real easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So closing and locking outside storage and keys.
Maybe I'll back up to make sure that you've got your jack on the front of the trailer up as far as it'll go as well.
The jack stand, yeah, because that's the place you're going to bottom out for sure.
Yeah, and you don't want to have to pay to replace that.
No.
So keys. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about keys for a minute. More than one person has locked themselves out of their trailer. You have probably 2 keys that go with 90% of all the trailers made in North America, or RVs for that matter. You have a key that locks your door handle latch. That latch key can also be unlocked by a manufacturer's master key. So if you ever lock your trailer and you can't get in, you can get a master key from a manufacturer, usually at a dealership. You'd have to go out of your way to do that, but you can slide in and they could unlock the latch. They cannot unlock your deadbolt. The same key that locks your latch will also lock your deadbolt, and if you've locked your deadbolt, you cannot unlock the rest of the trailer with a master key. So one thing I would encourage everybody to do is bring both sets of keys and keep one set of keys outside the trailer, because there's been lots of stories of people locking themselves outside the trailer. You probably have another key that's got 751 stamped into it. That 751 key unlocks your storage lockers underneath the trailer or the RV. Chances are that 751 key will unlock the storage locker of the trailer in the campsite next to you. So never seen anything stolen, never seen anybody go into it, but hey, don't put anything in there that you're not prepared to part with.
Mm-hmm. And a good place to, I guess, ask for help if you can't get into one of those either. So a lot of the times people will get some, those magnetic key holders that they can stick on the bottom of their rig, make a note in their phone of where it is. We have a keyless entry vehicle. So our truck we can get into with a key code, and everybody knows what the code is. So we tend to keep our second set inside the vehicle, locked inside the console, which makes it easier for us. I have a higher confidence level in being able to find that than having a magnet stuck on the bottom of the trailer.
And it's really easy to accidentally lock yourself out of the trailer. It doesn't even have to be fully engaged. Just a kid running out the door could catch the deadbolt latch from the inside with their shirt, and they close it, and now you're euchred.
Mm-hmm. And we have done this. And some models of travel trailer, actually, if you can get the storage compartment open, you can actually climb through to the master bedroom bed. And then if the bed lifts up for storage, you can get into the trailer that way. The first time we locked ourselves out, that was the number one advice offered to us. Unfortunately, our trailer does not have that option. There's no access from the storage compartment at the front of the trailer to underneath our bed, but some people have it and they don't know it. So that's a great place to start if you have a travel trailer that you're locked out of.
But I did know enough to go get the master key from the local dealer, and that got us in pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm, for sure. With that being said, you want to make sure that your outside storage is closed and locked and secured before you hit the road as well, because you don't want one of those doors flying off.
Because if you don't lock it, the other latch that keeps it closed is not an entirely robust latching system. I think you want to have both of them done up tight.
Mm-hmm. So checking the battery connection.
Yeah, just make sure that your battery is connected. You've probably got wing nuts on it or some kind of nut. Make sure that those are tight, because it just helps keep the entire electrical system continuity. So just make sure that they're tight. It's just a real easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Make sure your stairs are up and your handle's in. I guess this goes in the same vein of make sure your slide is in, but super easy, especially with kids, to say, yep, everything's cool, and then you shear off the stairs on the side of your trailer. We have not done that yet, but a good thing. Just stairs up, handle in, last thing before you get in the vehicle. And then if you have electric brakes.
If you have electric brakes, make sure that you know how to use them and you know how to adjust them. And we really got our first information on this when we purchased the trailer and got a walkthrough. Is the technician who set up the hitch came in and gave us at least 15-minute run through on how to set up the electric braking system and to set the proper settings so that the brakes would come on when we wanted them to come on. There are different settings that you're going to want. If you're driving down a relatively flat highway or interstate, you probably don't have your brakes set nearly as aggressively as if you were going through some mountains. And so know how to use them, and you don't want to be figuring this out, because inevitably going down the road, you're going to run into a situation that you don't expect, and you're going to have to adjust your braking on the fly. And the first time that I had to do that was through a narrow provincial park, and I went down a hill and it was loose gravel, and I applied the brakes and the truck kept sliding, and I jacked up the brakes on the trailer pretty quickly. No harm came, but it was certainly got your heart beating a little bit. So just know how to adjust your brakes and what setting, not only for safety, but you're going to have a smoother towing ride as well.
Mm-hmm. So as far as the initial pre-trip checklist, that is our main checklist. And like I said before, if you have additional items, if you have other tips you want to share, get in touch with us on our socials and let us know as well. And as promised, we're going to review really quick the top 10 RV essentials. So these are all items we own. We have them in our trailer. We've learned from experience. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you don't need this, you don't need that. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But when you actually think of, one, the amount of time you want to spend in your trailer, and number two, the initial cost of the trailer, they aren't cheap. So a lot of these might be essentials that you might only ever need once or twice, but not having them that time or two is going to be something that could cause catastrophic failure to your trailer. So I would say the first essential item would be a water pressure regulator, and that takes care of inconsistent water flow at a park. So it really only takes one issue or one instance of inconsistent water flow where it spikes or it draws to kind of burst pipes to cause leaks on the inside of your trailer. Anybody who looks at trailer plumbing, like, it's not brass fittings, it's not like a residential plumbing system. So that is something that's super important, especially if you're traveling to places you haven't been. It's one of those things that you don't want to chance it on the road, because you don't want to have to deal with leaks. You're there to enjoy yourself. You might only have a weekend away, once a month, right? So having that water pressure regulator, they're not expensive. You just screw it to your hose and screw it to the city water connection at the park. The next one would be a dedicated drinking water hose and a water filter.
Yep. So I keep the hose on the opposite side of storage from the Blackwater tools, just to keep everything clean, but it's a very clean white garden hose. It's only used for drinking water, and we've traveled where the connection's been a little bit far away, so over the years we've got probably a good 75 or 100 feet of hose in there. But bring the hose and bring a water filter. It'll help your quality of water a lot better, and the filter is a simple blue Camco filter, again, not very expensive, easy to hook up.
Mm-hmm. And it hooks to the external hose, which hooks to the city water again. So RV fuses.
Yeah, you're probably going to pop a few fuses. I know we've popped fuses on the tongue jack. Sometimes the girls don't shut it off as quickly as they should, or something goes inside the trailer. We have loaned fuses to people in service areas where they can't get things going. Just a real simple variety pack that you can pick up at Canadian Tire or Walmart will get you through, and just know where it is.
Or your daughter tries to microwave butter in the metallic wrapper. Just saying, just in case, that happens to you. So shore power extension cord and surge protector.
Right. So you should have a shore power extension cord. Unless you're in an absolute serviced campground, you're probably going to need an extension beyond what came with your trailer. So getting 50 to 75 feet extension cord is probably not a bad idea. Get a surge protector to protect your electronics, your air conditioner, your TV, your microwaves, your computers, anything that you have in the trailer, because again, the power supply at campgrounds is not always as reliable as your neighborhood. So have a good surge protector on there. Probably a little bit more money, but certainly a whole lot less money than repairs are going to cost you.
Well, if you think about it, at home you probably have a surge protector for your television. Well, your trailer is a whole lot more expensive than that. And even as we were saying before, like if you forget to turn off your air conditioner and you plug in and pop, the air conditioner comes on, you want that surge protector to protect all of the components inside your trailer.
Don't also forget you need an adapter to go from 30 or 50 amps to a 120, and probably just buy that once and throw it in the bottom of the trailer and know where it is.
So leveling blocks, we've talked about this extensively on episode 5, where we answered listener questions and we talked about how to level your trailer. We have not one, but 2 sets of Camco leveling blocks. The ones that are yellow, they're square, they kind of stack together like Lego. Those ones are such a lifesaver when we've stayed at a lot of really weirdly leveled campsites with our trailer, and it doesn't always show up on the map. Sometimes the descriptions, particularly in provincial parks in Ontario, the grading is
more optimistic than it really is.
Yes, exactly. So having leveling blocks instead of like 2x10s is like just, it makes life so much easier. So basic RV toolkit, like what are some of the things we keep in our toolkit?
We have a kit that we picked up from Canadian Tire. It's got wrenches, pliers, ratchets, screwdrivers, duct tape. We've got a couple of different sizes of wrenches. I've actually gone in to make sure that I've got the right wrench to drain the water heater. I've got the right size thing to tighten things, so make sure you test those out over time. But a good toolkit will help you down the road. We were traveling in California near Pismo Beach, and we pulled into an RV resort, and just as we're coming in, of course the entrance was low, the hitch hit the ground, it knocked the sway bars off, and I had to go back out once we got set up and retighten up the whole hitch. Not a hard job to do, but without a toolkit, you're not going to be able to get yourself moving down the road. You're probably going to find a lot of things that you run into over time that it's a right size ratchet or wrench, and if you just had it, you could be done in 5 minutes, and you don't want to have to wait around for somebody to come rescue you.
And I guess just as an add-on to that, we don't have a separate one for the trailer, but we always make sure we bring our drill, because we actually have a special bit for that we use for our stabilizing jacks. And you're going to want a drill in case your slide, your like automatic awning or your automatic slide doesn't come in. Having a drill with the proper extension, which should come with your trailer, to wheel that in manually is going to cut your time by like 80% would be a good
bring
idea.
your drill. It's real easy. Just throw it in and you're good to go.
So headlamp and batteries. I would say we use this all the time.
Headlamp and batteries is really good. Inevitably, if somebody needs to take a look at something, they can strap it to their head and they can take a look in a tight space and get it fixed and not have to rely on somebody to shine a light for them. I use this honestly around the house all the time. Probably one of my favorite tools, but I always bring it camping. I keep it in the drill bag. I know exactly where it is, and I've used it to take a look at the water pump, change fuses, just check things out in general. It's been a huge help. Not to mention the fact, hey, listen, gonna go for a walk down the trail at night, or somebody's gonna use the washroom, it's real handy there as well.
And I steal it to read books at night, because Dan's a bit of an early to bed kind of guy, and I'm a bit of a night owl, so I usually stick it on my head so I can read. So sewer hose support. I would put this under, is it an essential? Yeah, but maybe not everywhere. Like, we own one specifically because when we were planning our trip to the Pacific Ocean down Route 66, we encountered a lot of RV parks that we were planning to stay at, which basically had in their RV park rules, you had to have a sewer support or you weren't allowed in the park.
Yeah, and if you're going to camp in an RV resort for a week and you're going to use your shower, you're going to use your toilet and fill those things up, hook up your hose. Remember, as you've heard in previous episodes, leave the gates closed, but when you do go out to dump, you can go out, pull the gate, dump the tank, and the sewer support will let the entire hose drain. You close it back up and you go back to enjoying the rest of your trip.
It keeps it at a proper slope to drain everything out, and it looks a lot better and doesn't wiggle around when there's water going through it. It's
one thing to kind of empty your hose at the dump station of a provincial park. It's another thing to be that guy in the RV resort who's playing with his sewer hose like a slinky toy, trying to get the last bits out. While the neighbors next to them are trying to have a picnic. Yeah. So gloves. We've talked about this before, but can't say it enough. Gloves. Disposable gloves. Don't reuse the same gloves. That's gross. And I specifically have a set of work gloves for doing the hitch, and they're only used for the hitch. I'll reuse those. I do not use those for handling sewer type material, and sometimes you just need a set of disposable gloves. I've used them for emptying the sewer. I've used them for the kids when we're cleaning fish at the fish gut station. And last but not least, we've talked about this enthusiastically in episode 2 when we talk about blackwater maintenance, but having the clear sewer hose elbow. It is oddly satisfying, but super important. Tell us why. Because it means you can have a look and know what's coming out of your trailer, and you know when everything is out. And if you're using a blackwater flush, you can hook up your blackwater flush. You can run it until the water runs clear, and then you know that everything is out. And you also know if something went in there, unfortunately, maybe a kid has done something, or somebody's used too much toilet paper and you don't see it come out, then that's a good indicator that you need to keep an eye for that coming out. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems down the road. But it's a very sanitary type device that stops you from having to kind of unhook and have a look and then keep going and hook back up again.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So that's it. That's our walk around. That is what we do before we hit the road to travel. And those are our top 10 RV essentials that we always make sure we don't leave home without. Tune in next week and we are going to talk about something that, I don't know, maybe we should have started with it because I think it's pretty important, but we're going to talk about all of the ways that as part-time RVers, as weekend warriors, that you can travel further. So we kind of have a goal to kind of see all of North America as weekend warriors. And we've come up with some pretty specific ways on how to allow that to happen when we're just on our vacations from work. So tune in next week when we talk about that.
Bye-bye, folks.
See you later.